Okay, we are rolling. Hey everybody, and welcome to our grand finale, episode 16 of the Skagit County Track and Field podcast. Today we are going to cover the distance events, and also we're going to cover a little cross-country training. Unfortunately, our county legend, Mr. Jess del Bosque, is not available tonight. Just for the listeners, we had a scheduling conflict earlier where we kind of got snowed out. And then this week, Del is having a couple minor surgeries in order to get himself ready for track season coming up here in a few weeks. Now, as this episode airs, it will be the Wednesday before our first week of track. So this is it, last one, and I'm excited to dive into some distance stuff and get us ready for the season. So the first thing I'd like to talk about, normally we do a 2-minute drill. Since Del's not here, I'm going to kind of talk about him real quick. So I knew Del as the head cross-country coach at Mount Vernon High School, and then also as the distance coach there. He has retired since then and now come back. And he is an unbelievable human being, a really good coach, but an even better person. Recently, they had a trail at Skagit Valley College named in his honor. And just hearing the stories of the people that came out and kind of talked about him and shared the experiences was really, really cool. He's a guy that we are so lucky to have in this area. And we miss him tonight. I would have loved to have talked to him a little bit about his philosophies on training, but we get to do that during the season. So we're going to miss him. But I was also kind of wanted Kevin to take the reins here and talk about, he was just inducted into the Burlington High School Hall of Fame. Kevin, can you kind of talk about that real quick?
Yeah, it was a real honor to put him into our Hall of Fame just because, I've coached against him for years, and I guess I've thought of him so much as a Bulldog legend, and I really didn't know the full extent of his Burlington Edison. I knew he went to Burlington, and then it kind of just recently, basically with the trail dedication. Of course, he's such a humble guy himself. He would never, broadcast his success, but he was went to state and cross country twice at Burlington Edison, and then went on and actually ran at Western Washington University as well, in addition to just a stellar coaching career for decades at Mount Vernon. And yeah, absolutely a true county legend, kind of one of the original I guess founding fathers of the county track meet and county cross country meet. So yeah, really, really happy to be able to induct him into our Hall of Fame, and well deserved honor for him. And yeah, can't wait to see him on the track again in the spring.
Yeah, and with that, and thanks for doing that, Kevin. I appreciate it. I did not know that he ran at Western either. And like you said, he's so humble. He would probably, be the last person to share those things with you. But in his honor, let's jump into this. I kind of wanted to lead us and start us out with the difference in training a cross-country athlete from a track athlete. And we can kind of go around here and get everybody's opinion, but maybe just the biggest difference in training cross-country runners from those distance events. And maybe we'll start off with Brad first, just because you do both, and then we'll move to Alyssa, and then we can kind of compartmentalize and separate from there. Brad, do you want to take it away?
Sure, yeah, I'll do the best I can.
Okay.
Differences between cross country athletes and track athletes. Well, I guess first would be obviously the trainer you're training on. I think and of course, I think I'm sure a lot of people think it's really important to get those cross country runners doing their quality workouts on something other than a track. Although that's we sometimes do track workouts or other workouts on the track. Philosophically, I mean that's you got the shorter distances for middle distance runners. So the workouts are going to be a little bit more on the anaerobic side compared to cross country runners on the aerobic side. A lot, especially when you're talking about an 800 runner who's running a lot less distance than a 5K. So I guess that's what I would point out in broad strokes.
Yeah. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Yeah, I would agree. Mileage for me looks a little different in track season for my distance runners, especially depending on whether they're gonna strictly do the 800 and maybe a 4, or if they're like a 3200 specialist. But I really try to make sure that in track that they have some of those shorter push workouts that I might leave out of cross country or replace with a long hill grind or something else during the foundational period. And then I do more focus on speed endurance in the back half of the season and kind of ramp up the track work partway through. So kind of a different look. And then I have a slightly different instructions and duration for them on their easier runs and recovery runs in track season. Just with the focus of not burning them out, but making sure that I'm not just looking at their mileage, but that I look at what they're going to be running and what they need in the bank to do that. So, yeah.
Gotcha. And then on the Burlington side of things, and maybe Sue, you and Tanya can double team this, but kind of as you're observing those distance runners, what might be the biggest difference in cross country kids or track kids that run distance at Burlington?
Well, for track, I would say for sure, like Brad and Alyssa already mentioned, there's a higher percentage of their workouts are probably anaerobic or speed related than they are in cross country. And then also just diversifying a little bit between your like primarily 800 runner versus the 3200 runner. Having to diversify the workouts a little bit because you're not just training for one length of race for a 5K race.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I think it gets a little bit harder with, especially like what Brad said, training the 800 versus training for the 3200, and then finding that balance in the middle, and then training, in cross country for the same distance. So I think the other thing that's a little bit different, and it may not factor big into it, is the reverse of the weather in track versus cross country. And then having to adapt to that, I think plays a little bit of a part in the difference in the training too, at certain times of the year.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, in cross country season, you're going from really good weather into, at state, I mean, it could be kind of messy, and then you're flipping that switch once you get to track season. Kevin, anything you want to touch on in terms of being involved in both of those programs as well?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit unique for our program in the fact that Sue and I coach cross country, and then we turn over the kids to Travis and Tanya for track. But I think the big thing doing that is we just communicate a lot. I know that Tanya's very in tune with what our kids did last year in cross country, what their season was like, and then coming off of that, a lot of communication as far as what kind of mileage they did in the off season. And she has because we communicate really, really well. I think it really helps that everybody's on the same page. Like Tanya knows that we completely trust her training methods, and she trusts what they're coming in with as far as a base goes. So I think it works really well that way, in the fact that just, knowing it's not like these kids are showing up and she doesn't really know what they're coming off of it. She has a real handle on exactly what they've done in the off season, how much they've grown since the previous track season, and is able to really tailor their workouts for that.
Yeah, go ahead, Sue.
I was gonna say, it's nice to be in a collaborative situation like that too, like where we're talking about what our kids are doing and specific needs for specific kids, and bouncing ideas off of each other. I mean, for both the track season and cross country season. So I really appreciate having that relationship. That works well for us.
Yeah, I've always thought I've always thought that dynamic was interesting with you guys, Sue and Kevin doing cross country, and then, Tanya and Travis at track season. I always thought that was cool because, like, for us, and Brad, you've said this before with like your throwing events and your sprint events, it's 100%, autonomy to those coaches. And for us, I mean, with Alyssa, it's like, hey, here's the distance. It's your mini program. You run it the way you want. So, we're pretty hands off at Woolley in terms of distance stuff. Brad, you are full meal deal in it because you're coaching that event. And then at Burlington, you've got almost 4 people involved in those distance runners throughout the year. So I always thought that was interesting. Going into that, I'm going to kind of try to switch the focus to track real quick for this next question. And then Jake, you can go bounce back to cross country. But at this last coaches clinic, Brad and I and Jake and Ruck and some other coaches were solving a lot of the world's problems at a little tap room, the Hidden Bar at McMiniman's. And we were talking about mileage, and Brad, you said something that kind of light bulb switched in my head, just because I could relate it to sprints. But I asked you, okay, in track season, what's your typical mileage for your athletes? And you said, well, at the beginning of the year, they're right around this mileage, and then we slowly taper off to, maybe right till we get to that championship phase, they're at this mileage. Obviously, their intensity is going to ramp as their mileage shrinks. Can you just kind of touch on that real quick, Brad, and kind of recall that conversation, and then we can kind of go around to the track folks and kind of get their opinion on that.
I wasn't at McMillan's.
Sorry.
No, of course. Yeah, and it's so much depends on what individual you're working with. We have, Parker Mong is running like 80, 85 miles a week right now, and we got new kids running 20, 30 miles a week. But generally speaking, you need to be aware of what your kids are running at this time of the year, and maybe just kind of starting into the actual track season. And then, yeah, as the season develops, we like to, and accordance, and I'm sure a lot of people do, is kind of back off that volume maybe by 10%, 15% of what they have been doing as you introduce the faster running, maybe which actually should have been introduced during the base period, but as you start doing more specific work, I guess is the best way to say it. And you can maintain that aerobic stuff with your long runs during the weekend, and that's the way we like to do it.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
No, 100% answers my question. I was waiting for someone else to jump in. Anybody else track wise, mileage wise, can you kind of give us a sneak peek into your program or maybe your philosophy and just kind of a little sweet spot? And like Brad said, I know that probably differs by the athlete, but kind of what are you looking for in a typical week mileage wise from your distance runners during track season?
I would have to go along with Brad in that it really does vary because you have kids coming in with 0 mileage and then kids that are in the 50 to 60 miles per week range already. So I think for injury prevention, especially finding out where that lower level group is, I like to use heart rate monitors the first week just so that they can kind of see where their heart rate is at so that they can get to a level where they're going to see an improvement in fitness, but not, overdoing it. So they're in the red zone the entire time they're running. And then kind of just gradually increase their mileage over, the first 3 to 4 weeks, especially. I'm more talking about the kids that are at the lowest fitness level, because we have kids that show up in their Keds and, wearing their jean shorts and are like, okay, I want to run, I want to run distance. And it's like, whoa, okay. So I think, again, being able to find the middle and to understand where your athletes are coming from, like especially the cross country kids, and communicating with Sue on that, and then increasing mileage throughout the course of the season, based off of that.
And are you using the heart rate monitors that you also use for class, the watches?
We are. The ones you guys, do you use those too?
Yeah, we do. And that's a sensitive subject around Woolley apparently, but yes, I love the heart rate monitors. That's just cool that you can double team PE and your distance kids with that. So Alyssa, are you looking at mileage as well, or do you have a different metric that you're looking at in terms of workload throughout the season?
Well, I look at mileage a fair amount, but like they said, we've got like I kind of in my brain, especially early in the season, I'm kind of splitting them into three groups: the kind of the walk-on new athlete, or maybe the new track athlete that hasn't discovered that they love distance running and they want to do it forever, but they just they're untrained. And then we've got like the cross country runners that are coming back, but they haven't run all winter long. Some of them, they just it's crappy out there and they haven't engaged. And then we have the year-round runners who have maybe they're already running 30, 40, 45 miles a week. And so I basically during the first 3 or 4 weeks I basically look at this group, I need to get them their foundational base, so they're going to get more than a 10% build every week. They just got to get an aerobic base going. And then I'm going to extend that stimulus with some strength work at the end. And then the middle runners, I'm going to push them a little bit, not as much. The top runners that are running more already, I'm not going to increase their mileage that much, honestly, based on what I know of their running and their skill, because I'm looking at the long game, some injury prevention, honestly, because, some of those throughout their high school careers, they've pushed and hit a wall before. And I don't want that moment to come, in this season for them. So I just basically break it out, and I try not to do the 10% a week thing. I try to look at it in 3 to 4 week chunks. So I look at the first 4 weeks of track, and then I kind of moderate from there. And then eventually I do taper that and turn my attention more to the pace work and the speed endurance training on the track, kind of like what possibly Brad was mentioning. So that's kind of what I do. I kind of piece them into 3 groups, and I try to run them in groups based on that.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Jake, you want to go cross country real quick?
Yeah. So the question I have, and I think I'll if the Burlington crew wants to kind of give their start, and then maybe Alyssa and then Brad in terms of order on this, but this is cross country specific. So why I'm asking this is, when we talk about some of the other events in track that we've looked at, we focused a lot on technique and some terminology. And one thing about distance that I've found with kids is that, one, they're curious about some of the terminology that we use sometimes with our workouts. And I think with cross country, since it's a little bit more of a fixed distance that you're training for, you might be able to answer it a little bit more equally in terms of what it looks like for your distance program. As mid distance and long distance track, it may vary for this. So anyways, a couple of words that kids always have some questions on about workouts, and you can give me what it means to you in terms of what the workout looks like, or you can give it to me as well as what the definition for you is. So the first is VO2 max, and then the second is tempo. And so what is that in your distance program? So what is VO2 max? What is a runner, if a runner asks what VO2 max is, what is that, and what is a workout that's a VO2 max workout? What does that look like versus what is tempo, and what does that look like? Is that a fair question to sort of ask in that? And it could be that you program wise don't use those anymore, or don't focus in on those anymore, and maybe kind of go into that, because there's some different strategies on distance training in terms of the importance of those specific things.
So in our cross country practices, we use the term, we talk about tempo runs a lot more than we do address VO2 max. Tempo run we would describe as being running uncomfortably uncomfortable. you can't have a conversation with the person you're running with when you're you have an out of breath conversation rather than a comfortable conversation. You can spit out a few words, so we try to like describe how you would feel as you're running the tempo pace. That would be to the novice runner. For the more experienced runner, they all have their watches, and we can tell them a heart rate that they should be looking for and run at this particular heart rate for this particular amount of time, or however we're chunking out the workout. So, because a tempo would be a percentage of your VO2 max. So we don't use that term with the kids really much at Burlington. So we do try to, at the start of every workout, this is the work we're doing, fartlek workout. This is what fartlek means. This is what it should feel like, describe how it feels to the novice runners. And then of course you can use different terminology or more scientific terminology with your kids that have experience. Kevin, you want to add anything to that, or?
Well, no, if a kid asks me what VO2 max is, I just tell them to Google it. No, I think it's, yeah, that Sue's right on with that. Just really trying to give kids the most basic understanding of why they're doing the workouts that they're doing, and kind of trying to put it into terminology that they can understand and kind of get. We've talked about a little bit on some of the other podcasts, like with percentages and run this one at 85%, and it's harder and harder. The heart rate monitors certainly, and with the kids with their smartwatches now, it certainly helps to give them a good range of what we talk a lot about, even as something as simple as this needs to be at conversational pace. Like, you should be able to have a conversation on this easy run and not be out of breath. If you're out of breath, then you're running too fast, because recovery is just as important as the speed stuff. So a lot of it is just putting it in terms that they can understand, especially with your novice runners.
And Alyssa?
Yeah, I would agree. We talk a lot about tempo and threshold, and we talk about kind of depending on, like, if we're doing intervals on the track, we talk about just what type of recovery or rest we're going to have in between these and why, whether it's full rest or walk or jog. But I do try to keep it simple and try to explain to them that they need these push paces to just increase their body's capacity to perform under pressure. And the tempo run is pretty important to me. I'm a big fan of a tempo run most weeks. And I even encourage them in the off season. I think that they've made a huge difference for me personally. So I'm a big fan of the tempo run. I like it for 4 miles. And so we lean into that, but we don't talk a lot about VO2 max. I don't show them a lot of calculations. I just tell them how to push, and I give them a pace, but I also try to train them to run by effort. I think runners need to learn how to run by perceived effort. I think when they get super dependent on a pace or even on their watch, they lose a little bit of the read on their body and their race potential on the big day. So that's also something that's helpful for me with trying to explain the new push pace to them is run, that uncomfortably hard, run this, shoot for this pace, but run by that feel of effort. And then that actually just improves their ability to read what their body's telling them and know that the next time they're going to be able to push a little farther.
Alyssa, that's really interesting you say that, because Tanya and I have been talking a lot about that perceived rate of exertion and trying to shift some of our workouts so that they aren't so dependent on their own watch, and actually, what does it feel like? Give a number, what does it feel like? And we keep the data, and then their times or whatever, and then after the workout you can share, well, you said this felt like a 8 or whatever, and then this is what you were actually running. So I think that's something that is kind of coming more into the research as being important for the distance runners to learn to run by feel.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's that, like, they sort of like look at their watch to tell them how they did. And I get that. Like, we're running, for time. But in that training, like to give them another tool in their toolkit for a race day, to know when they've got something else in the tank or another gear that they can step into, I think they have to practice that. So, yeah.
Brad, do you have anything to?
Yeah, sure. Terminology is so crazy. Some people, there seems to be these days, or maybe it's always been, that 3 or 4 different terms for the same thing. we don't use tempo, we use threshold. I think Alyssa sounds like she uses both as well. We don't use the threshold or tempo term much actually during the season. That's more stuff that they do during the base period in the summer or in the winter. But it maybe periodically we might use it during the season, and we say, okay, this is going to be a threshold run, and then we pair that with, sounds like the other coaches do, with like, this is how your body should feel. We don't necessarily get into the physiology of it. So we do it that way. We during the season we'll try and get that same stimulus. We don't call it a threshold run. We do it in interval form, so that's maybe a little bit easier because then we can assign paces and recovery periods for that. So that's kind of how we deal with that. VO2 max, I kid, VO2 max, their eyes are already glazed over. They all have no idea. We'll say it because they might, like our higher end kids that are really students of the sport might be online, like, what's VO2 max, Googling it. So we pair that with, oxygen delivery system. And then we pair that with like a race pace. We do a lot of our workouts with race pace. So you got your goal pace, or specific pace, and then a degree of separation from that based on, what your event is. So it's kind of the way we go from there.
So one of the reasons I asked this is because when I first started, this was 18 years ago when I first was coaching, and I was coaching cross country, and you have what you were like taught and used, and then you have what you were handed to, and you get your VO2 max chart, and then it starts to tell your predictors and all that stuff. And it was easier when the kids didn't have access to that because it was all hard copy stuff. And so that's kind of why I asked the question, because it's one of those things where I love that you were all like, they get online and they start looking at it because they get obsessed with what those numbers and percentages should be, and they start to question not necessarily the training, but they start to question, like you guys said, or putting less emphasis on the feel of a race versus, or a feel of the intensity of a workout versus a time based on a percentage that they think they should have. So I that's kind of why I wanted to throw that out there, because I appreciate the science and knowledge behind it, but sometimes when you grasp onto like a tiny bit of it, and again, with anybody, but especially with kids, they start to be over analyzing those particular numbers or those percentages, and then it takes away from what the reality is it's a race, so go compete. So I loved all your answers on that, because that really was what I was trying to pull from you. So
well, and to piggyback onto that too, Jake, it's like you could assign a workout at like your 2-mile race pace, and it could be a lot of short intervals, and the kids are going, oh my God, I'm never going to survive this. But it's like, you're not running each work bout that far. It's only like 200 meters. So it's like, it's not supposed to be. And like Alyssa, we use this too. After the ed practice, I go around and ask the kids, what was that? Was that an 8 workout? Was that a 9 workout? Out of 10, was that a 7 workout? What are we hitting today? So, I mean, the kids, they see the workout, but they don't take everything into account, the rest period, the total volume, and all that. So you got to pair it with kind of what you're expecting physically out of the kids.
Well, before we bounce back to track, I'm gonna show you guys how naive I am sometimes to distance running. We're talking about terms, and there are times after practice where I'll go up to distance kids and check in with them, say, hey, how are things going? What did you do today? And oh, good, fartleks today. And I'm like, okay, sweet. And then I'll have a jumper that's next to me or a sprinter that's next to me, and they'll go, what are fartleks? And I'll just say, I have no freaking clue what the hell a fartlek is. Can someone please tell me in 30 seconds what a fartlek is?
A fartlek is it means speed play. It's basically you run kind of intervals. So it might be 4 minutes at an easy effort, 2 minutes hard for a certain duration. And there's a number of different ways you can do them. There's a landmark fartlek. So basically you jog easy, and then someone in the group picks the next landmark that you're going to run at a harder effort to, and you run all there together, and then you jog easy, and the next person picks the next one. So yeah, this fartlek is a training tool for me, it's both a good exercise in learning that perceived effort, but it's also teaching my newer runners that they have more than one gear. And sometimes early on, they just need to learn that even when they're tired, that they can switch gears and their body will find what it needs. I'm sure somebody can explain it better than that, but that's how I use it.
I think that cleared it up for me. I appreciate it. Now I'll know. Now I can say, did you do a landmark fartlek today, or did you do a timed fartlek today? And then they'll think I'm really smart. Okay, this next question goes out to the track folks. And I know that there's an obvious answer for this question, but I want you to dig a little bit here. How do you determine who does what? How do you determine your 800-meter runner from your 3,200 meter? And I know that the easy answer is, well, the 800-meter kids are really good at the 8. And the 3,200-meter kids, they can run a little bit longer, a little bit faster. So they're really good at the 32. I understand that, but can you kind of touch on some intangibles, or if you've got a really talented kid that could do the 8, the 16, and the 32, how do you figure out which they push toward other than like event layout schedule for the postseason?
I would say for us, it's a little bit harder to have the kids who are not cross-country runners say that they want to run the 32 when they come into the season with 0 base. I try to guide those kids to do the 16 and the 8. And a lot of those kids aren't super serious about running. They just want to come out for fun anyway. And they'll beg us not to do the 32. So those kids I usually try to direct to do the 16 and the 8. And then we always go back and forth with the 8-4 kids. Do we want to bump some of the 400 runners up to the 8? We Kevin and I have conversations about that, depending on how much speed they have, and whether or not Kevin needs them in the sprint events a lot of times. So sometimes we fight over those kids, but that's kind of where we're at with deciding on which kids. And then the kids that run the 16 usually will combo with the 800. But again, it just depends on, like, a lot for us depends on what they come into the season with, and then what they want to run. If they really don't want to run a certain event, you know how that turns out. Like, please run the 32. We need you to run the 32. I absolutely hate it. I don't want to do it again. I hate the mile. So that obviously plays a role in it too. And then they go to Kevin and they'll say, I hated that race. I don't want to run that again. And we'll put them in a different event. So
Tanya, we had a girl not too long ago. This is probably 3 years ago. We had 0 girls running the 32. And so this girl, I think she ran cross country maybe her freshman year, and this was her senior year. And she figured out that to let her, she's got to earn a certain amount of points. Now, she was a thrower at this point, hadn't run for a long time, but she's like, hey, I show up at these league meets and there's 2 girls running the 32. If I'm done with shot and disc, can I get out there and run the 32? And didn't train for it. And I'm like, sure, what the hell? So she'd go out there and she ended up lettering because she would score points at those league meets running the 32. Now, it took her 36 minutes to run it, but she lettered.
there's always that random kid that wants to grab a few points. And then, like you said, there's always a spot open in the 32 and they'll
There
jump
is.
in that. But
Yeah. Anybody else?
Anacortes, we're blessed as distance coaches that we get the cross country kids in for track, so we're already pretty familiar with a lot of the kids we have to work with, and know their abilities. But we at Anacortes, we kind of let the kids self-select for the first part of the season, kind of see whether, especially if it's a new person we've never worked with before, and then if need be, I might kind of try and nudge them a certain direction. We have a couple of our cross country boys this fall that were on the cross country team this fall. They're training out for track for the first time. They were soccer players previously, and they're dead set on being 2-milers, right? They're not 2-milers, so we'll see how successful Coach Templeton is nudging them toward the 800. So watch out for that.
Good. Alyssa, you want to touch on it at all?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just missed a bit of Brad. My daughter's trying to cook.
Oh God.
Yeah, we I also, I know the runners in Woolley pretty well from season and from just staying, connected hopefully throughout the year. So I kind of start the season looking at that, I'm team building, we're base building, and we're all kind of training like we have the 16 in mind. And then they'll get a time on the 16 and we'll look at them, and then I'll talk with them, and then usually they have an idea of what they want. So in those early meets, it's just a great chance for them to get out there and run. And then I really try to pay attention, of course, to what they have natural inclination for them. Like, the 800 takes what? Raw speed and guts. And then the 32, there's some runners that are just really good, thoughtful runners, and they can stay hooked into a 32 in a way that just propels them to success. And so then I start paying attention to how they're doing in those meets, but also how they're feeling in it. I really believe distance running is so mental that I basically want to champion whatever they seem to come alive in. Even if it wasn't like their best race time on paper, like if they believe that they've got something to bring to that event, like, let's do it. Just because I think that there needs to be that spark for them to really meet with the kind of success that I want for them.
Awesome.
And I would say too, Tanya and Travis and I really will, when you get those versatile kids, the ones that do kind of have, it takes a special kid to have the speed, as well as being able to run far, like 32. But we have a conversation as we kind of get into the season and really see how things are shaping up. You've got, that's the beauty of athletic.net is you could go through and see, and that's always the guessing game, like who's going to run the 8, who's going to run the 16, who's going to run the 32, what are their opportunities to double, what's their best opportunity to score, what's their best opportunity to get to the state meet. And so we a lot of times we'll have a lot of conversations around that, like what do we think really is their best shot, and it might not necessarily be what they think their best shot is, and we'll have them give us input as well, but we'll kind of try to spell things out for them. But if you get a kid that has that kind of range, it's a good problem to have, but you can't do all three unless you are an unbelievable special talent, especially when you get down to districts or state, and you do have to make some choices, and it's a lot harder to you really can't do a 8:32 double, and then you've got the 16:32, which is a natural because you've got the 2 separate days, but then you got the 8, which would have to be a prelim. Do you run the prelim, and does that take you out for some? So there's a lot that goes into it that way, but we try to have those conversations with the kids, and Tanya and Travis and I talk about them. The most versatile kid, opposite on your end, Johnny, from yours, we had a kid that he was a cross country runner, and he was a very good. He was top 10 in state in cross country. He ran on our 4x1, and he was able to fast enough to run on a 4x1 team that went to state, and then also all the way up to 32.
Wow.
And I've never had any kind of kid with range like that, but he had just unbelievable range. He ended up running the 8 and was second in state in the 800, but just never had a kid with that kind of range. So that then you have all kinds of other issues. Do you run the 4? Does he run the, we actually used him on our 4x1 because we needed him.
Yeah. And before we get, Jake, to your next cross country question, this is a quick follow-up. We talked in the sprints how some programs and some schools separate their long sprinters and their short sprinters, and they have different workouts for those groups. Does anything like that happen in the distance world? I know that there might be maybe workouts here or there, but do you guys ever, or have you ever seen a program that separates their 8:16 kids and a different workout for their 16:32?
I was actually going to ask that question. I've experimented with both. I've created workouts for each of the three distances, and then I've created, just maybe an 800, then a 3216, two separate workouts. Both have worked well, just kind of depending on what kind of spare bodies you have available at the time. But yeah, I'd be curious to see what everybody else has to say about that.
Well, I've been working on a workout, two workout paths, one 816 focused and one 1632 focused that I kind of want to test the waters of this year. I'm not exactly sure because early on, especially the newer runners, they change their mind a lot. And then also I want to keep a sense of unity, and also there's going to be some trading back and forth, but for especially the track workouts, I'm going to test, they're going to run different pace goal pace repeats and things depending on what their target distance is. And then for the 1632s, I got a couple longer workouts off the track that I'm going to introduce to them. So I'm trying it just because the races vary so much. The 800's another animal altogether. So that I'm still learning how to coach effectively. So I'm also all ears for input.
Cool. You guys at Burlington, is everybody together?
Well, Kevin and I have talked a lot about, or we've talked in the past about putting the 4 and 8 kids together midway through the season. And we tend to, if they're a pure 800 runner, we tend to drop off the mileage. And their speed work on the track is a lot different than the 16 and 32 kids. But I've always wrestled with that as well. Like, where do they fit in, especially or the pure 800 runners that don't really even do the 16. Yeah, Kevin, we've talked about that before. It'd be nice to have another coach that would just be doing the training for those groups.
Yeah, Tanya,
Yeah,
I was just going to say, it seems like with that methodology, you either got to do it or you can't, or I should rephrase it. You either got to do it or you don't, right? You either have the two groups and they're totally different, or everybody's kind of together. If you're tinkering here or there, I don't know how effective it would be, or if the feedback you get lets you know if it was worthwhile or not.
I think the thing is, it's tough with, what we were just talking about is sometimes you don't know as the season progresses and evolves, kids are trying all 3 different races, and you don't really know until it gets closer to the end of the season or halfway through the season, at least, what their target race is going to be. So it makes it hard to differentiate into groups like that if you're not sure what the end game's going to be for all of them.
Yeah.
I think what Tanya was bringing up earlier too, with the kids that come in that aren't cross country kids, and we've had our fair share of, a lot of them happen to be Tanya's volleyball girls because they're great volleyball players, so that's why they don't do cross country, but they're also really talented runners, and some of them do have the foot speed to be a 4x4 800 runner. And so that's kind of, I think, when we've done the most kind of switching it up, where we'll say, midway or toward the end of the season, now they're going to drop down. They're going to still do the 800, but they're going to drop down and do the intervals are going to be with the 400 group. Because a lot of times it's the full 4x4 team, so it's kind of nice to have that camaraderie with them, but also because you are a little bit afraid of them breaking down a little bit because they don't have that base that a true distance runner has. They've got the foot speed, but you got to really balance that out.
It's interesting you guys said that because I was thinking about that as you're kind of working through it, because we used to phase out our philosophy for sprinting and pretty much everything with that in terms of 3 4-week blocks essentially. So conditioning, competition, and then championship phase. So it's almost that situation where you've kind of got the first couple of weeks sort of everyone's situated together, and maybe it's a little bit more about building that base up. And then as you get into that April phase and start to see where people are having success, start to identify maybe where they need to go and then where their opportunities need to go. And maybe that last phase, as you're moving into, you know, sub-districts and districts, is where they start to, like you said, Kevin, like it's, look, you're an 8-4, and really the 400-meter training at this point in time, that speed training is going to be more beneficial than it would be to kind of get that. So, you know, if a coach was kind of trying to figure out how to juggle all this, you know, associating those three, especially if you don't know the kids. So like, you know, if you blocked it off sort of that way, based on what you guys are saying, you might be able to sort of find some middle ground. Because again, sometimes we've got some distance coaches that come in that don't coach cross country, you know, or not even a part of the program. So like, you know, Tanya, you're at least you're in the weeds. So like, you know, if you're getting somebody outside the school coming in and having to coach that, at least kind of categorizing it maybe in those three phases, and then so that separation and diversification starts to increase as you start to identify the kids, go along with kids. I don't know. I was just kind of thinking about that as you guys were talking. So,
Jake, you want to go into mechanics a little bit?
yeah. So I was really fascinated to hear everyone's thoughts on this because, and Kevin, you reminded me why I wanted to ask this. Is I get a lot of people's thought processes on distance runners being slower than sprinters. And it's hard to remind people that like fast people are fast, and really even with track, but even with cross country, I mean, it's a longer distance, but it's not a half marathon. We're not talking about that. We're still talking about having to move at a good pace. And so where do you build in sprint mechanics to your cross country program or track program with your distance kids? So is it in your warm up? Are you going over wickets? Like what is that sort of sprint mechanics aspect of really actually teaching a kid, you know, good run form, quick run form at that particular point with those types of athletes? And Kevin, I'll throw it at your program and Burlington if you guys want to start, and then you know, maybe Brad and Alyssa can jump in then.
In cross country, our sprint mechanics work or our form work, it generally happens in warm-ups, specifically on days when maybe we're going to do an interval workout or a tempo workout. And we probably could or should maybe do more work with form in cross country, but that's pretty much what we, you know, the amount of time that we devote to it, not nearly as much as in track. Anybody else? I'd like to.
At Anacortes, we pay a lot of attention during the foundational base period in the summer. We do a lot of hill sprints, so we introduce kind of form there. You can't really use bad form running up a hill. It's hard to run uphill on your heels. And then once the season starts and our strength training kind of modifies into some power oriented stuff in the weight room, we'll break our kids into the girls and boys sections. So 2 days a week, our boys will be up in the weight room doing something specific while our girls are running wickets and doing some acceleration stuff on the track. And then we flip flop, and then the girls will get 2 days up in the weight room, and the boys will have 2 days a week down on the track doing wickets and some kind of acceleration or maybe even max velocity stuff.
During cross country season, you do that too, Brad?
Yeah, we do that all the way through track cross country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for us, during cross country early on, we're introducing hill sprints, and that's just an easy coaching opportunity. We're off site a bit, you know, their ears are open, and even if they can see footage of themselves going up, I don't know, it's just good, and they feel powerful in it. During season, we probably could do more, but we discuss it. But I do try to introduce semi-regular short speed work here and there when we have the opportunity and it fits into our training plan. But also I'm a big fan in mid-season, even just because so many of our meets, it seemed this last year, ended on a track. I would give them the 300-meter accelerations to finish some workouts and just coach their form on that roundabout, and even just the way they acceleration, the way they had a visible difference. And that was just helpful. And it also just gave them a little bit of confidence.
Yeah, I love what Alyssa said there. Like, I do the same thing a lot of times after our recovery runs or easy runs, what have you. We'll do some strides on the track, and that's a great opportunity as a coach to look at, especially the kids you're unfamiliar with, the running mechanics, and a lot of time to actually correct that in the time that you have while you're doing that.
Hey, here's a quick question that kind of goes along with this for everybody. During track season, do you guys as a program, does everybody warm up and do some drill stuff together? Or do you guys kind of have your team meetings and then boom, right from there, everybody disperses and it's up to the event coaches to get everybody warmed up and drilled out before they actually start their specific practice? Hopefully that makes sense. Brad, what do you guys do?
At Anacortes, we'll have our meeting, then we break that into groups, event groups, and we all do our warm-ups, our mechanical stuff. It's always a little bit different, but we used to do it as a whole team, and that's what my experience was as an athlete when I went to high school and college. I don't think it's hard to get a lot done coaching wise or correcting wise with 80, 100 kids doing the same thing at the same time, and it takes forever. So I found a lot more success breaking down into smaller groups and being a little bit more intimate.
Yeah, Kevin, what do you guys do at Burlington as far as that goes?
We do it all together.
Yeah.
That's how I take roll. We're in lane lines. We have captains and lane lines, and so stand at the front of the line. It's almost like a seating chart. Quickly able to take roll that way, and it's kind of, I don't know. I think the kids kind of enjoy that aspect of it. Gives them a chance to talk and stuff. But yeah, Brad's absolutely right as far as getting any kind of real good feedback is very, very difficult for that. When we do our sprinters, before intervals, we'll do the warm up with the team, but then we'll also do a separate one for the sprinters before we do an interval workout as well. Jumpers too.
Gotcha. That's good. And once again, all three of our programs are in different spots. So we used to everybody together. And then this year we decided, we're going to do some quick RPR stuff that's going to take 5 minutes, and then everybody's going to split and go to their specific coaches, and then those event coaches will get them warmed up and be responsible for that. So we'll see how it goes. We're constantly changing crap, so who knows. Okay, the last question before we kind of close down here, and this is for cross country and track folks. And you guys have touched on this a little bit, but I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into it, and that's mindset. And I think the thing I appreciate most about distance runners and folks that coach the distance events is, I mean, you have to train your kids how to run with certain mindset. I would say especially for track, because you're running laps over and over again, and that's grueling. It's god awful boring, and you can really kind of psych yourself out. I would assume. And maybe that's no different in cross country, but what do you guys kind of talk to your kids about mindset wise? What are some tools that maybe you found that work, or just things that as a coach you kind of need to be mindful of in terms of a kid's mental makeup? Alyssa, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. Well, I think actually making some time to talk about mindset stuff, to read occasionally to the runners, something I do semi-regularly. And I know it's not like work on the track, but I think it's some of the most important work we do, is just making it as not awkward as possible to talk about the fact that you're nervous, or you're not sure you have what it takes, or am I the only one that feels inadequate here? How am I going to stack up next to the runner I was last year? Or the nemesis from across the county, or the competitor that I want to be. And so I find kind of favorite things. If I know that runners have favorite people who inspire them, I'll find some of their quotes. We have a Guess Who Said It once a week that we kind of mine into that we really like. And then I try to give them tools just as far as race day, just so that I can normalize the nerves. And oftentimes the captains will talk about how they get nervous, and then everybody will have a chance to share. This is early in the season, what they do about that. And it's been really helpful. So those are some of the things I do. But on race day, I tell them before race day that their brain is probably going to tell them two things. It's going to tell them, "Ow, this hurts" at some point. That's valid. And then the second thing it's going to probably tell them is, "I can't do this anymore." And I just let them know that that they can do it. I let them know that if their mind doesn't stop, their legs won't, and that they're tougher than they think. And that's helped a lot. Also, I tell them to anticipate their mind kind of playing chicken with them a little bit, like trying to tell them that, like, kind of let them off the hook. Like, I think I'm getting a cold. I didn't sleep well, all of these things. And I remind them that every runner who's going to that line has something that they're trying to overcome in that moment. And so even in that, they're not alone. And it seems, I hope, to help. But I would love to hear what you guys do and how you impart that, because I know it makes a difference. And it's, to me, one of the most important things that I try to do.
Alyssa, when you say, "Ow, this hurts," and I can't do this anymore, that sounds like my 8th period class. Sue, what do you guys do for cross country?
Well, just a couple of things that come to mind. We talk about during the race itself, how to keep your mind actively involved in what's happening, and, maybe strategies for chunking the race into portions, and what are you thinking about here? What are you thinking about in this certain, portion of the race? And just trying to get them to think ahead about, and anticipate how they might feel in certain portions of a race if they've previewed a course in particular. So, for race specific things, talking about that. Another thing that we do with some of the kids is ask them, what kind of feedback do you appreciate during when you are racing? What motivates you? What does not motivate you? How, what kinds of things do you want to hear from us as coaches as you're racing? We certainly don't want to say things that are going to be not motivating. We want it to be meaningful, and we want it to be something that motivates you. So having conversations with kids, because they're all different, some want to hear certain things and some don't. So just kind of having those conversations and getting them to think ahead and plan ahead for racing specifically.
Yeah, Tanya, what about you? How do you break up that monotony of lap after lap after lap?
Well, I would kind of go along the lines with Sue in that, like the building relationships with them and understanding what their personality is, I think is really important too. And knowing what they need as an athlete. We have a lot of mindset conversations post race as well, asking them, because sometimes I don't think they think about what they're thinking about during a race. So that's usually one of the first things I say to them is, what were you thinking during that time? Or how did you feel about that? And so I think for them to articulate how they're feeling, I think helps a lot with the races as well. But sometimes it can be hard because, they're here to hear with what motivates them. And so I think that becomes kind of a challenge, especially with distance runner, because a lot of them are type A personality. And so being able to talk them off a ledge and to use your counseling skills, I think is super important. But getting to know them as people first, I think is key.
Yeah, Brad.
Yeah, that's something I always wish, I come home after every practice or after every week of practice and think, gosh, I could be doing better in that area. I jokingly talk to the distance runners every year, especially in cross country, that there's lots of sports and involve lots of skills that as distance runners, you guys have really only one skill. It's your ability to suffer during a race. Um, I think it was maybe Sue that mentioned this. We talked to the kids a little bit, or a lot of it actually, about what to expect, how to feel during a race, and emphasizing that you're not going to feel good, 3/4 of the way through the race, and you should expect that. And then also we give specifics on, kind of like Sue said, also just kind of chunking certain segments of the race. The first half of the race is going to go off without a hitch. I mean, that's the easy part. But once the second half of that 5K or the 3,200, you need to get from one end of the straightaway to the other straightaway, or landmarks during a race. You need to get from that tree to the top of the hill, and then find another landmark to chunk off. It's hard. Yeah. I mean, it's something that we both took Vernakia's class at Western. I think I've got 5 or 6 sports psychology books, and I just always think there's more to do. I mean, the old axiom is that running's 20% physical and 80% mental. So
Yeah.
you can always do better.
Kevin, from a head coach's point of view, when you're over by the jumps pits and maybe the 16 or the 32 is going on, and you see, your kid, maybe they're excelling, but they're not quite in first place, or they're struggling, maybe they bonked a little bit. What's some things that you can shout out to them, or how do you address the mental side of things from a head coach's point of view?
Well, I think I have a one advantage is that because I do have a relationship with them from cross country. So, I think that there is a level of knowing them and knowing kind of, Sue and I try to find out what they need. And I think that's exactly what Tanya was saying, is just knowing the kids, having a relationship with them, and just, some kids want to talk right after they race. Some kids don't. Some kids, you're better off debriefing with them the next day. Some kids want, for you to really get on them to dig deeper, and some kids, that is the last thing they want to hear. So, having a little bit of that knowledge of who they are and what they like, I think helps. Tanya does a great job. Tanya and Travis, I think, of having a really good open conversation with the kids on, they do a lot of goal planning and a lot of, individual work with those kids. So I think that they do a really good job of forging those relationships with them. So, cause I think that's really, really the key.
Awesome. Jake, you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, so we've ended all these roundtables with kind of just asking coaches, and I kind of brought up the point of, we got some coaches that are new and maybe listen to this, or what is a quick piece of advice that you would give a new coach, or wish you knew when you first started out? And I'll start with you, Tanya. You could give us, what would that advice be?
I would say have a passion for what you do. I mentioned earlier that I did interviews today for our PE position. And I felt like those people that had a true passion, and they talked a lot about coaching, you could just see it, and it was inspiring. And, that should be the reason that you coach. Definitely. Because it's going to give you longevity, and it's going to make you enjoy your job for sure.
Alyssa.
Well, I am a newer coach. What would I tell to my previous coach? So I think to be kind to myself in the way of sometimes if I wonder if I've missed the mark, or if I feel like I left some potential out there on any given day, or I didn't see like I don't feel like I coached an athlete successfully. Anytime I find that I'm making something in this or some perceived failure about me, I'm doing the team and every athlete a disservice. So I guess always keeping it about them and doing what I need to do to let things go, improve, and move on so that I can keep serving them without getting in my own way.
Brad?
Can I offer two?
Sure.
Okay.
Since
With
you were so
regard to
quick
just-
on our rapid fire, you're allowed two in this session.
Yeah, I was pretty good on the rapid fire. With regard to kind of just as a coach, and I think I was asked this question before, and I'll give the same answer. Just be patient with yourself and the athlete you're working with. There's so much to learn as a coach. You know, just with the aspects of the sport, with the human side of coaching. It takes time. With regard to maybe some training advice, if you're trying to give a kid a certain stimulus, look at the kid, see what he's about, and there's more than one way to reach the same goal. I guess that's what I would.
All right, great. Sue and then Kevin. Sue, you're muted.
Sorry. I would say you can never underestimate the importance of building relationships with your athletes. That is probably the most important thing that you could focus on. That, and then I think I said this before too, just continuing to have an open mind about learning new techniques, new strategies, new coaching ideas, and just continuing to be a learner and just refining your craft. There's always something new, out there. You could maybe think about and reflect about how you could perhaps implement it in your own program.
Kevin?
Mine would be enjoy it, have fun. Coaching should be fun. It should not feel like a job. And, just kind of, I think as you get further into your coaching career, I think it's really important to celebrate the small victories. It's not all about, getting to state, winning state, getting, league championships, county championships. It's all about there's so many really, really cool things you can celebrate with kids that, might not result in any kind of, a victory as far as place, but a huge victory as far as improvement. And I think when you really start to enjoy every one of those, that's when coaching really becomes fun. And that's the part I think that I've tried to appreciate more and more as I get further into it, is just when you see kids really do something that really makes them happy. That's pretty fun.
Kevin, I think it's a great way to wrap up our last episode of this, because that is one thing that I think Johnny and I talk about all the time is, I've had a moment where I've realized maybe I'm never going to have a team that wins a state championship, but I would much rather have, and Johnny said this, the kids that when they get married, I get an invite to that wedding because I made an impact on them. And in our coaching community, I think we have fun. And I think our track programs and our track teams and our kids and our coaches are technically sound. I think they're competitive. But most importantly, I think, we build a community and we want to have fun and want to enjoy what we're doing. And I think that's a great point to kind of end on, is just enjoy this. Want to embrace it. Want to be on a pod for an hour with, in the middle of the week with people and talk track. And I think that's pretty cool. So it's a great way to kind of end that up. Johnny, anything kind of wrap us up?
No, just thank you guys for coming on. Really appreciate the input. I learned a ton, and I need to learn more in the distance events to be a more effective head coach. So I loved hearing you guys talk. And I guess this is it. Season 1 is wrapped up. Thank goodness. And we'll be back for season 2. Maybe not 16 episodes, but we'll try to get as many on as we can. And maybe pull some folks from outside the county in, and yeah, go from there. So had a lot of fun doing this. Thank you guys for showing up, and best of luck. And unless you're running against us, but best of luck this season coming up. And I appreciate you guys spending the time and getting on here. Much appreciated.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
guys.
Thanks, Johnny.